All right, it's January of 2022, believe that or not. And here we are in Papa's den. He's got his cuckoo clock and the
I remember
box.
a very similar attitude I had with my father up at the cabin that we built in Donnelly. You know, when we were building the cabin, it was a lot of fun because it took us a few years and we always had something to do. But we sat up there one time and maybe I better not talk about it.
And I got to talk to your dad. You're really close to your dad. I was too. Bumpa was a great influence in our lives.
We'd watch the deer walk through the down by the shore, and then we had a grouse that was sitting there picking on pine needles and talking.
That was a beautiful place. I got to play horseshoes with him up there.
Yeah.
And work on the cabin when they were building it.
Did you help work on it?
Yeah, a little. I mean, I ran around. I was young, but
I don't remember too much about that. We didn't get up there a lot, and that's the biggest reason that we ended up. When he passed away, we decided we better, because there was some question about who's going to take care of it, who's going to do this, that, and it was. And with your callings in the church, it was quite a drive. You get up there on a Friday, and you almost have to come back on a Saturday, and that's when most traffic was going. And,
right.
And so we didn't end up going there very much.
I remember Bampa used to let us drive his car on his lap. Yeah, when we were in like Ann Morrison Park, he'd let us. I'd be like 7 years old, and he let us sit on his lap and drive his car.
Well, I had the greatest respect for him.
Yeah.
And he, like I said, he was. We had the other days we went through Pocatello, and there's a fellow that called me. His name was Hal Lloyd. He was one of the, I think, he's the last living employee of Coleman Builder Supply.
Really?
He's 80 something now. And I guess for me, that's not too much off, but we stopped and talked to him, and Reed said, "What do you remember most about Marion Coleman?" And he said, "He was honest." He said, "That's all I could say."
Completely honest.
Completely honest.
Yeah.
And he was. And I remember the day that just the day before I went on my mission, he asked me, he pulled me aside, he said, "Would you like the lumberyard when you come back?" And I'd worked there since I was probably 12 years of age of some kind, anything from cleaning up sawdust to helping unload. And in those days, we didn't have a heister, so everything was done by hand.
By hand.
And I remember the day that he told me to take the truck down to Ingham, Idaho, and get a load of cement. And that was,
wow.
That was really, the bags were 100-pound bags, and when they came off, all the hair on my arm was burnt off. Ooh. Because it was hot, and I'd load up that big old Studebaker. It wouldn't go very fast. And we had to pull, the part of the hill was a hill we pulled up, and we didn't have the freeway there then. And here I am with this load, and I'd have it in compound, and I'd have it pedal all the way to the floor, and it was probably go maybe 8 or 9 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
Holding that load.
How old were you?
Probably 16.
Driving that.
And we would, I didn't have a whole bunch of cars stacked behind me because they couldn't pass.
Sure.
And finally I made it to the top, that was fun, and it was just a relief to get to the top, but it didn't have any shocks in it, I'm sure. But then we get the lumberyard, and we had to unload it.
Yeah.
I loaded it, now we unloaded it, and then we sold it sack by sack, and so that was, but I really asked if I could work out of the yard because I liked, it just kept us physically strong. We handled a lot of lumber, we handled a lot of sheetrock.
Wow.
And I don't know why, I remember one day with Chet Warner. Chet's wife had a lot of health problems, and he was so nice to her, but he was a real good foreman. And Dad's employees, they had a vote to see whether they wanted to join the union or not, and they said no.
He'll treat us better than the union. He's honest with us.
We'll stay with Mr. Coleman.
Wow.
But I used to like to do things with Chet and with Chet Warner. I remember one day we had it must have been a little sheetrock, I suppose. We did a lot of sheetrock by hand.
Was it the 4 by 8 foot sheets?
Well, then we got to 4 by 12s, and usually they were going upstairs, and we had to take them apart because they wouldn't bend otherwise.
Right.
And so we'd take a sheet at a time. But we had this one time we had a dog that just really ferocious sounding, come out there to chase it to the car. Chet said, "Go around the corner." I was driving. I mean, I really thought it was neat to drive in those days. Around the corner, and here come that dog in. He just opened the door and hit it in the nose.
With the door?
And it just rolled it. It rolled it. And, he said, "Go around the corner again." Around the corner. Here come this dog. I mean, he'd put on the brakes and scratched his feet in the gravel. He said he won't do that anymore. He finally lost. His wife finally passed away. I remember I went up hunting one time and with the Chase boys, and in those days they said, if you see a deer, why get it? And this was just the week before I went on a mission, and I don't know, I must have had 6 or 7 shells is all I had left for the year, and I took them, and the 2 canyons, they said, "Wayne, go up this canyon, and I'll take the 2 boys went up the other canyon." He said, "We'll meet at the top," and he said, "If you see something, get it for us." And I'll be darned, I crossed into some deer, and they were looking down. I picture it now. I looked down, there was a nice big 4-point buck, and I shot and it didn't move. And I thought, "What's this?" And I shot it again and it didn't move. And I thought, well, maybe I'm missing. It's in the snow. We were at about 6-8 inches of snow. And some more deer bounced out, and another one on the side. I knocked that one down. Pretty soon I had another one wounded, and I know I was down to 1 shell, and that one finally got up. He's going to walk away. I thought, well, I better put it down. And I knocked that one down. So I knew I had 2 over the far hill. I walked down through, and this one I'd actually hit, and it fell, and its nose was right in the branches of a tree that held it up.
Held it up.
So it looked just like that, like I hadn't done anything. So we had 3 of them.
Oh, wow.
And I took the 4-point buck down and put it in Chuck's garage and hung it for him, and he was so appreciative of that. He said, you just don't know how much that's for us to eat.
It's a lot of meals.
A lot of meals.
Feed his family. Yeah.
And then one other time when I was visiting with Mother, and we were on our way back to North Carolina, I stopped on up to fishing at our favorite place. We used to go up with Dean Labor a lot, and I caught a big one. It was too bad I couldn't get in the net. And I went back, and I remember sliding my hands along the side and getting a gill and lifting it out. I took that down and put it in his arm, and he was a big one. But, I've had some great times, and Mother was so good. I mean, she would let me hike. We hiked all the hills. I mean, on top of any point we'd been on.
You said you went to all of them on the Pokey Point, right? The whole valley.
And of course, now there's houses and things built there, but we thought it was the big country. Back there, we'd take a little kit and build a fire. And it seemed like we always cooked the pork chop, and we made biscuits. I had a great thing.
Did you have a nickname at the lumberyard?
Yeah, my name was Putty.
Putty, where'd you get that? What'd that mean?
One of the job I had in those days, we fixed a lot of windows. And the windows were old wooden windows. They would bring the window into the store.
Putty the edges.
And then we would take the old glass out, and you had to take the old putty out. You had to heat it to get it out.
Oh, wow.
And then there were little pins that held the glass in
Those little metal triangles, yeah.
Put it in, put new pins in, put new putty in, and that was my job.
Ah.
I did most of the window repair in those days.
Who named you Putty?
Dean Labrum.
Dean.
And I spent a lot of time with Dean Labrum.
It's like a friend and a mentor, huh?
Fishing. Turned out that I think I was the first Eagle Scout in some 17 years. Dad was the bishop then, and Dean was his scoutmaster.
Wow.
And I ended up staying with him as his assistant scoutmaster till I went away to college. And
you guys did a lot of adventures together.
A lot of things, a lot of hunting and fishing together. Taught me a lot of things, and the dad was so busy because he spent 1 year in the legislature and the bishop and lumberyard, and then after that he was into actually what they call it, the stake mission president, and then was also the stake presidency. And I remember him telling us that they called the stake president to be from McClellan was his name, and he said he was competitive in his lumberyard, and he really would do anything done or cut anybody.
Mm.
And he said, "Man, I want you to be my counselor." And he said, "Only if you'll have normal business practices.
You'll be honest.
You'll be honest." And he says, "I'll do it." And he took that as a counselor, and then after that, he had a normal lumberyard just down the road.
Wow.
But Dad was that kind of guy. Yeah, and of course, I think I've told you this story before, but he he had proposed a house that they called the Coleman Jan, and it was a little 2-bedroom house, an unfinished basement, and he could build that and get a GI loan for the servicemen that came out, and their house payment would be less than the rent payment they were paying. And I talked to Hal Lloyd, and we saw him. He's still living. He said I sold 486 of those for your dad.
486 houses.
Yeah, houses.
The Coleman Jan.
The Coleman Jan.
Oh.
And he says we just built them everywhere.
Wow.
He had a way of doing. He would bring 3 builders together, and he said, "Tell me what you can build this for." And he put it together, averaged it. And he said, "I put those 3 together, averaged it, and this is what the average you 3 is. Would you build it for that?" "Yes, we will." And he says, "You buy all the lumber from me, and I'll get all of it." So he had the lumber yard was full of projected lumber, and the bank came one time and said, "We need to have you make a payment on this loan." I probably told you this before.
I don't know if I remember or not.
And he said, "Well, I don't have the cash, but I have the materials here, and I have the houses." So, "No, we want your cash now." So we went across the street to a different banker, and they said, "Marion, we want your business. Pay off that loan." And he said, "How much do you want?" Dad told him. So he said, Why do you want that much?" "I have to pay my tithing," he says. He said, "What's tithing?" He told him. He said, "Anyone who is that honest with your Heavenly Father, you have an unwritten, you can borrow anything you want, how much you want.
Let me know."
Yep.
Open line.
And he was honored as Mr. Popatel, and he was really wonderful.
Yeah.
So I had a great relationship with my father.
Yeah, good dad. Amazing dad. He was the kindest grandfather. So patient.
And then when he wanted to know if I wanted the lumber yards, I almost felt bad.
Yeah, I felt like you should, probably.
I just said, "No, Dad, I think I'm going to do something else." In those days, you had to be older to go on a mission. Because I remember 21. Because I'd had equivalent to 3 years of college in by then. And I was within 2 classes, I think, of 5 different majors. I didn't know really what I wanted to do for sure. And so, they were very supportive of my mission. I loved it. I had a great mission. I felt a lot of success there. We did have a lot of success, tremendous amount of success, and that just was unheard of in the Swiss mission in those days.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been since.
I remember that one. Was it 100 baptisms in a month or a year?
100 a month.
In a month, and the story to get the last baptism was
close to that.
quite miraculous.
They just haven't come close to that. But anyway, but my father was my mother was a German, and he had to learn to live with her. I've said many times that mother was. There might be 3 ways to do something, but there's only one way right, and it was hers.
Yeah.
And that caused a problem with my brother Reed. They were really going to squabble there might have been something that his way might be as good as mother's, but mother's had to be the right way.
Right.
And so they sometimes crossed a little bit. But we had a good family life, and
what do you remember about family? Like growing up in your home, as far as like chores or meals or family interaction?
We always had responsibilities, but and I was the oldest, and one thing I remember frequently is Mother and Dad, I guess maybe once a month, would be leave and go to the temple and put me in charge of the children.
Of the kid.
And I can remember Mother very patiently ironing her temple clothes. And she was telling me, they're special, we just use those in the temple. And they would be gone.
And they were going to Idaho Falls, right?
Going to Idaho Falls.
Yeah.
Wintertime, snowy roads, things like that. We lived in a lot of different homes. Dad, he would design a home, and then he wasn't a contractor, we'd have them build them. Mother would paint them.
Really?
I can remember had to have a Campbell's hairbrush. Each cabinet had to have 7 coats of varnish on it, and we would carefully sand them.
That's a lot.
Oh yeah, they were well done, and I don't ever remember advertising a house for sale. Someone would walk in, and Dad would say, "This is the last house," and they'd buy it. We'd be gone again. So that's why we met as many.
You moved like how many times from that you remember?
I remember about 16, 17 times. And,
did it make it hard to like set up your room and feel permanent?
You know, I guess not. It was the way of life.
Did it?
And things like that. Yeah.
Who did you share a room with?
Didn't have to do that.
You had your own room?
There was a room that we had 2 beds in downstairs. Reed and I were scheduling, but I didn't like it. And they went to a used store, and we bought an old frame bed, and I put it out in the unfinished part of the basement because that's where I wanted to be.
So you slept there by yourself?
Slept there by myself many times.
So just a cement floor and studs?
We had the wires above so mother could hang the laundry on so they would dry.
Down there.
And it would be about 6 inches above my nose when I get in bed.
Reminds me of sleeping in the garage.
And we used to then go out and clean on as soon as it was, even so the clothes wouldn't freeze too much, we'd go out with a rock and clean all the lines off with the rag. So she was very specific about her laundry.
Wow.
And,
how did you heat your home? Was it coal back then?
Oil.
Oil, okay.
Yeah, an oil truck would come by and
fill your tank.
Fill your tank, and that's what we did.
Do you remember being warm enough in the winter?
Oh, nice and warm.
Plenty warm. What about
nice,
summers? Did it get too hot?
Yeah, we didn't know what air conditioning was. We just kind of
have a fan or open the window, or
we leave them open at night and close them up first thing in the morning, and
do it again.
Yeah, but once again, we had a garden, but we didn't have a rototiller. We had a shovel and
spade it.
We sprayed it up one at a time and rake it out.
It's a lot of work.
And do things like that. But we may have lived in a lot of different homes, but I had good friends, and like I say, I got into scouting when I was young. And, I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed working with others in scouting.
What kind of things did you enjoy most about scouting?
Outdoors, being outdoors. We'd always plan some big trip somewhere. And, we went back into what we called the chain links. It was a trip we took the top 6 scouts on. They, we had little goals that they would meet, and we had a pair of, that's just crazy. But we got ready to go on this trip. We knew it was going to be long, and we picked trails that had only been marked by an axe. They were
wow
on the trees. And we started out, we had all the kids, the 6 kids, unload their backpacks, and we had made the backpacks. We made
the frame.
We made a frame, and then our wives got canvas, and we sewed the canvas. It
wow.
was so neat because we had a place for my fork and spoon would slide in, and we could hold it. But I mean, one kid had some I don't know why my mind was 8 bottles of hair oil. One took his metal fishing box. And,
it's in heavy backpacks.
We just had to go through everything and see when we get up there. And the one kid says, "I'm going to tell my mother this is too hard for me." And we said, "Okay." And you can't. We left him on the trail. We knew it wasn't very far, maybe another half mile. And then we got him having fun. He came in, but things like that. I remember coming back. One of the kids rolled his hand over, rolled a big rock over his hand, got a bad gush. So we had to leave a day or 2 early. Compression on, I had to bring him in. But on the way in, we saw some eagles over a big antelope that was on the ground, and we went down and looking at it, and they had done something so that he couldn't move his back legs, and they would tie at him and just take part of his rear end and leave, and he would swing his arms around.
He was still alive?
Still alive.
So somehow he had broken his back.
Yeah, and he was swinging his arms, and I remember
and they were eating him.
I took my axe out and hit him on the head to take him out of his misery.
That's good.
And it's funny how I could remember something.
I mean, let him eat it, but the sufferings.
Yeah.
Oh.
But,
what memories do you have of high school? Because I know you're
most of my time was spent in music, in the band.
Yeah.
Mother let me quit taking piano lessons in the 4th grade, which is probably a mistake. But that day, I was interested in the saxophone, and they got me a small saxophone, and I really worked hard on it, and went to state when I was a junior and got the top award. I played Chartist. I had heard we had a band concert, and we had the world's greatest trumpet player come in as the head of that band.
Wow.
He directed the band, and But he would stop us in a practice, that's a flat instead of a sharp. You're missing the
one person. What an ear.
And I thought, I want to be a player. And he had a triple tongue. I said, you can't play without the saxophone. I said, I'm going to learn how. And I did, and I really got the top award. And on the way home that night, my friend had a number that was listed on the half. There was 144 and a half because their house was on the alley in the back.
Oh, really?
It was not in the front. And we pulled in the back alley. Terry Rich was his name. He was a French horn player, and he was good. Better athlete than I was. He and Fred Jensen and we would walk to school every morning early to be there for band practice.
How far was it?
Clear across Pocatello, which was probably
a couple miles or a mile and a half?
Or better, maybe 3 miles, 3 to 4 miles.
Walking 3 miles is wow.
Carry your instrument every day. And he didn't carry the French horn because it was a school French horn, but I'd carry my saxophone.
Wow.
So I could come home and practice.
Let's make your shoulders strong.
I really made it the thing to do, and I became, I loved to play. And in those days we had opening ceremonies for Mutual. And I would probably play for every ward. We had solos we would play.
Oh, wow.
And broken my heart one day because one night I had a young girl, they were difficult piano accompaniments to do, and she was in that accident after MI one night. The kid drove off in the Portland River. And they had the car full of the girls. I think it was 8 of them in the car totally or something like that. And they all died except he was the only live one to come out.
Oh, the driver?
And the driver.
Oh.
And there was a prominent physician's son in town. He had his own car, and they got talking. He drove right through a dead end and drove right in the river. And I remember how I thought, who's going to play? I've got saxophone solos that I've agreed to play. We played for the Kiwanis and
And she was your best accompanist?
She was it.
What was her name?
I don't remember right now.
So she died when she was 17?
She had to be about 16.
That is so sad.
And then
wow.
Vernon Croshaw, I met her, and she was an excellent accompanist. And so we just go to the music store, open up the drawers, and practice one, and we play it the next week. Because she could read it, and I could read it.
Wow.
And I was probably playing my horn 3 to 4 hours a day at least.
Wow, that's a lot.
And mother had me take a few lessons for a while. The guy really could play fast and hard. I mean, he'd play with me, and I'd try to skip it with him. And, I mean, it was challenging. And, so I got the Master Musician Award when we graduated, and then ended up right to the 45th Army Band, and became their lead saxophone player, the dance band, and at the thing. And also, I was actually their we had a big long baton, how they call it? Baton.
The drum major?
I was the drum major. Had a big, tall, long.
That I used to like lead with and twirl a bit.
Mm-hmm. We had a lot of parades. I was the drum major and like that until I went on a mission, of course, and I didn't. Then I guess, plus I also was invited to join by Gene Burton's. He had a big orchestra. Well known. He'd been traveling the world. Decided he wanted to come home. He put together a band, and he had me ask me. I was the youngest guy in the thing. I mean, I was in high school. And here was this big, well-known guy, and he was so amazing. He would sit down in a mission and on scrap paper write out a whole new song, and different. I mean, the saxophone was in E flat.
Yeah. Different keys for everybody.
And his keys. Well, we'll play this. See if you like it. If you like it, Harry James had a first right of refusal to any of his songs, and we just play it. He had a brother that a big hand. He would reach an additional third instead of 8 keys. He'd reach 11, and he couldn't read a note. It was all by ear, and he was fantastic.
Wow.
Just why they would include me, I don't know why they did.
Was that in Pocatello?
Not in Pocatello.
Oh.
And so we played with a lot of the graduating. We went to Rickson, played their graduation, Idaho State graduation. We played out at the golf clubs and
wow.
At the golf, not the golf clubs, the golf clubhouses. and usually had a job almost every weekend. And then I played in the city band, a saxophone player there, and we played every Sunday afternoon in the summer.
Like in the parks, or like in an auditorium?
Out the park, an auditorium. And the one year that I was here in Boise, dating your mother, my wife, I went down and auditioned, and they put me right in the band the next week, and they featured me one time on a soloist.
What was your transition like from high school to college?
I don't know, it's just a thing to do. I went right straight from,
Just graduated, summer?
I studied, went right straight to Idaho State College, and it was there. I could stay at home. I could still be in the 45th Army Band. They met once a week, and it gave me some income. And I worked off hours at the lumber yard. And I remember one time I was offered a job with the Four Freshmen. And the Four Freshmen was a very prominent musical group, kind of like the Beatles. But they were very accomplished in the various instruments they would play. And it was a graduating ball for the Idaho State, called Idaho State College in those days. And they came up to me and said, you play pretty well. Would you like to come to San Francisco and join our big band down there? And I thought, boy, this is something. I went home and told Mother, and she said, well, you come home smelling like a smokestack most of the time when you play your late jobs. She said, forget it. You should do something else. She said, I have to hang your clothes out on the line so often when you come in back with a dance job. But I made good money. And I remember one time this little girl that looked pretty nice. Not like you had a little girlfriend during it. I didn't really know how to treat girls at that time, but she was in our ward. That's how I knew it, and I got to know her. And she was kind of going with another guy, and she started liking me, and I thought that was pretty neat that she would like me over him. And she was into music quite a bit. And I'm probably going to tell you about her, but I know that as soon as sacrament meeting, sometimes when the sacrament was done, I'd leave for the band. We had to do the band concert, and she'd want to go with me. I said, no, you finish seeing the meeting, then come. And I remember one time she took hold of my hand, scared the dickens of me. I didn't know what that was. In fact, I began to wonder if I'd done a problem. Dad was upset, and I said, Dad, we held hands. And he said, that was okay. I didn't know what it meant. We didn't talk about sex or anything with your parents in those days. It's just you had to kind of learn on your own.
Yeah, that's how it was.
But and then she said, well, I'm going to wait for you. And I said, no, don't do that. She said, I'm not going to write to any girls in the mission. And Groshaw, the one that was accompanying all my souls, their parents came to my parents' door and said, we're going to have our daughter wait for your son to get back to your mission. And I said, no, that just shut down. That's it. And I really put my heart in my mission, worked hard. We had a lot of success.
Yeah.
And but I was a traveling elder for something like 14 months.
And you're in Switzerland and Austria and southern Germany?
I was a traveling elder in Switzerland. First 14 months I was in Austria, and we had some tough times high in the Austrian Alps. Just really hard. That's got stories of its own. But then we had a car with a companion to go around. We had the mission of people that we went through a number of different door approaches. So I was always going to get a new one. And but I remember the one we had, there was like 7 or 8 or 9 lessons that the people had to have before they could join the church.
Right. And
most of the missionaries would know the first 2 lessons, all right. And then after that, they didn't know, or they didn't have the language to
in German, yeah.
So they would call the mission home and say, we'd like to have Brother Coleman or Brother Gee come do lesson number 6 or number 7 or however we are. And so we got to see the cream of the investigators.
That's nice.
And help them with the big parts. They usually didn't want to tell people about word of wisdom and tithing, so we did that.
Right.
And we used to almost debate the Jehovah's Witnesses, so we could just put them on the table. Really, we almost ended up with a husband and wife feeling bad about each other. We said, President said, stop it, don't do that. You should just don't get in a scripture fight with them. we were a little cocky about it, thinking we could handle whatever they wanted to do. But the mission was wonderful. I was very tired at the end of my mission. I just worked to a frazzle. My health was about gone. But we just worked a lot of hours. I remember one time we were transferred to Basel, and we worked 3 weeks, tracking 8 hours a week. 8 hours, and more than that. And I did have probably 8 hours a week. 8 hours a week, I guess. So, and in 3 weeks, never got a single door. And my companion, I remember one time he came out, Thurman was his name. He said on the way, and he says, "I'm gonna go home. This is crazy. We can't keep doing." And right after that, we had a transfer to Rheinfelden. I went to Rheinfelden, and within 3 months, we had a little branch of about 18 members.
Wow.
And that was just
unheard of.
Just
yeah.
unheard of in those days.
Yep. Now it is too.
One of which was Rolf, and I've maintained the message with him.
Yep.
Kind of got us rambling. I don't know. When I came back, I decided, I thought I wanted to be a dentist, and I thought, no, I think I'll go to medicine. And so I tried. And I was very, very fortunate. I've told you about that. We had to do the MCAT about the day I got back. The week I got back.
Still thinking in German.
And not only that, it was open day of deer season, and I really loved the hunt, and I couldn't go that day. And I remember taking that exam. I think this is ridiculous. I got to the physics section. I hadn't had physics yet, and I thought, I don't know any of this stuff.
Wow.
And I thought, well, I'll apply anyway. What happens? And surprise to me, I was called for an interview. I remember his name now. He was the head of psychiatry.
I interviewed with a psychiatrist too for the interview.
And I remember walking there, and he looked at me and he said, "I only have one question for you. Why'd you do so terrible in your MCAT?" And I said, I've been on the mission for 2.5 years and speaking a different language and
hadn't had physics.
And he said, I don't have physics, and he says, "You accept it if we accept you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Give me $50 and you're in."
Wow.
And that was the only question they had to the interview. I left.
That's
He must have looked at my transcript.
not like that anymore.
Right.
You're a standout.
I always felt a little bad because I was short one class, and so we did scientific German class, which was a joke. We knew better than the instructor. The loner and I took that class. And the kids in the class didn't like it because we got the 2 A's. Days we graded on a curve.
Yep.
And that was all these guys in postgraduate schools. They pushed them into B's and C's because we got the A's. In fact, they even made me sit out in the hall and take the test one time so that they wouldn't be cheating off my paper.
It was on your paper.
And so they sent that transfer guy, and then they sent me that I was going to be honored at the Idaho State College graduation, being a top person. And I didn't even go. I wasn't interested, so I didn't. I should have gone for my mother's sake, because she liked that thing. She liked to be Dr. Coleman's mother.
She liked that, yeah. Well, you gave her a lot of pride that way, a lot of happiness.
I got some pride by it, and she loved it. And there were times when my practice got so busy that I had to start limiting what I was doing. And people would call, I couldn't get an appointment, and they'd call my mother.
And she'd try to get an appointment for
She'd
him.
call them back, and she'd say, "I'll find an appointment for you." And so I had to tell her, "Mom, you got to stop."
Can't do that anymore. So how do you remember meeting Mom and then being engaged and getting married?
Like I said, this one little girl I was with before, and she would have made a great wife. And she came up about the first week after I was back, and I had dated another girl, and she said, I can't tolerate this. I can't see her as somebody else. Either we've got to. And I said, well, I'm not ready to make a decision. And I remember following up. Dion Bailey was her name, sweetheart, and let's see, what's the name? The accompanist I had before, her name, I had her here a minute ago. She never married. She's still single. And but anyway, met mother at the institute.
At Idaho State.
She was attractive. In those days, my parents had moved to Boise. Dad sold another yard.
Oh, wow.
There, and they sent him there to start the prefab buildings. We we made some of the first trusses just by hand, and then that all developed in the machines. So I rented a little home the last year of that I came back. The year I came back from mission, I just rented an apartment in the basement of the Volkswagen's, which was in walking distance to the school, and I bought a lunch ticket in the cafeteria, and I could walk from there to the cafeteria. Then I'd walk over, walk over to where the institute was, which was right next door.
Right.
And the kids were there, and you meet people, and I got in there pretty quick because they found my music thing. I didn't play the saxophone again. I'll tell you one other thing. But they put me in charge of the choir. We direct choirs for state conferences. It's kind of known that we'd had a singles choir, and mother would come to that choir, and I'd met her. She tries so hard, but she does not have a vocal. It's really hard. She's really improved a lot over the years, and I admire her because a lot of people wouldn't even try. But that's not one of her talents. But she's got so many others that I'm tickled to death.
She's full of talent.
I said that one year when I did so well in the saxophone thing. When we came home from Twin Falls back to Pocatello, we pulled into Terry's alley in the back where he lived. We unloaded the thing. Mother backed up the car so we could get more light, backed right over the saxophone.
Oh.
Got every key except one. So that was on distribution at the music store for probably 6 months. This is what not to do to a saxophone. And then because of that, they got me a brand new
Selmer. So that was a good thing.
I went down to the guy and showed it to him. He says, "That's a Mark VI Selmer." He said, "Oh," he said, "that thing is worth a lot."
That's great.
I'll give you $3,000 right now for it. And I said, "No, it's not for sale." I give it to Lance. Lance picked up the saxophone and played pretty well. I don't think he ever got to the point where I couldn't outdo him, but we've had a few duets together. It's kind of fun. But I had a lot of fun in music. In my later life, when I came back off our mission in Albania, I wanted a challenge, and I thought, I'd really like to play the organ. And so I took that as a challenge to I never became a very accomplished organist. I came good enough that I could do almost any hymn I wanted to. I could play a decent prelude and postlude. You played
in church for about 20 years, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Somewhere in my 60s is when I started that.
That's amazing.
And I just love to hear the foot pedals in it. And so most people don't pick it up when they're there. But
what do you remember
from mother, and we had some wonderful kids.
Yeah.
You're one of them, obviously.
Let's wrap up with, what do you remember from your wedding day, like the night before, and the wedding day you went to the temple, and who was there?
Well, I was living in Boise at that time, and I worked out at the air base, dismantling, helping the dismantling of one of those ballistic missiles. There were 3 of them out there, huge things. I think there were 3 missiles in each place, and they were all covered by a big overhead. What I want to say, it's not really not a window; it's a big covering. It would open. These things are armed, already set for Russia. It was in the Cold War times.
Wow.
And then they decided to dismantle them. So I was in the dismantling process. I'd sit there in the summer time. They played the dance band on Sundays. And practice once a week. Play the concerts on Sunday. Practice once and play a concert. And skilled enough to do that, so it was kind of fun.
Do you remember how you asked Mom to marry you?
I did not plan that. It just popped out one night.
Just came out.
And she had a memorized acceptance. I swear. She said, "I'm more than happy to be the wife of your children," and whatever. I said, "Good. Let's make a go of it."
And then you're engaged for quite a while while you went to med school, right?
About 17 months.
Yeah. And you're sealed in the Idaho Falls.
We just decided it was best if I go to med school for a year. Get a year behind us.
Yep.
And she actually changed majors, went up to the trade school. She learned how to be a secretary and how to take shorthand. And Mother learned that at the trade school. And, I had a friend who was a year ahead of me in med school, and he had 3 children. And he says, one time they came home and he said the kids threw their arms around my father's legs and called him Papa. And he said I couldn't tolerate that. So he checked out of med school.
Wow.
And so he left. And med school was very competitive in those days, extremely competitive, and almost too much. So I thought it was okay if you're on the top. And I wasn't told it that way at Harmon Iowa. I couldn't beat him for anything. And but I tried. And he ended up being the chief of medicine in Utah for years. I don't know if you ever met him or not, but he was brilliant. He was a member of the church, and they had a baby with the SIDS, and after that he was never active in church. He just couldn't tolerate it. But Mom, we met in the institute. She was very attractive, and I'd kind of dated another girl for a while. In fact, we double dated. She was with Ronnie, and it was the guy that became a pharmacist, and I knew him. I sang in a barbershop quartet with him. And I thought she's pretty neat, and I just went and asked her one day, and she'd like to go to the basketball game, and she said, I've already got a date. Maybe she told you that, I don't know. So I've already got a date for that day. I said, okay, that was about all the ump I had. I wasn't going to ask anymore. She came back a few hours later and said, that date's off. He said, he told me he couldn't do it. So I could still accept your offer. And so I guess that's why we took it and went from there. She's a great, great person.
Good choice, Dad.
Not an outdoor person. She'd go outdoor with me once in a while, but I mean, she went with the time I actually got a deer with a bow, and I was hunting with a bow. I loved hunting, but you know, that wasn't her thing.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Fun to hear about some memories.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add? Any advice or thoughts?
Well, we had wonderful children, and I loved them. You know, I mean, my mother had medical conditions with TAS and TAIs. And I remember the time they called me down. My buddy, this was in the military police, and he called it. He said, "Your wife's down here in the car and doesn't know where she is."
Not making sense.
And I went down and talked to her, and I remember showing her a pencil. I said, "What is this, honey?" She said, "A cow." And expressive aphasia, and had a series of those. She still has little things we've never totally figured out. She has just the other day she hadn't had one since last May, but sometimes she'll have a few of those things, and it's always been a worry. But they advised that we not have more children. Of course, the third one was a boy, you, and I was tickled to death. 3 sons? Who could have 3 sons? And of course, probably she told us that she wanted a daughter, and we worked hard. Lance was praying for a daughter and kids, and finally we ended up delivering one that we delivered at home that night, and I brought in. We were called up. That was a record that night. I was called away from her birthday party to work that night, later delivery. The night of her party we put together, and that's the time I said, "What do you want for your birthday?" It's about 2 years, I guess. You had
Danny's 3 years younger than I am. Yeah.
2 years younger. She said, "I want a daughter," and I said, "You know, we can't. We don't have a daughter." I ended up delivered 19 babies in a 24-hour period.
Oh gosh.
And that was my record, and one nurse and me. I was a great believer of pain relievers. They called me Dr. Painless. That's kind of a nickname I had in the military. I mean, I would put in paracervicals, pedentals, epidurals, I don't know, whatever it took to give someone some. I'd go through, put all their blocks in, and I'd come back and deliver them. And
wow.
I thoroughly enjoyed what I was doing. And in the military, we had 8 doctors. Most of them wanted to be on the golf course by 3 or 4 o'clock, and we had a lot of problem with some of the lesbian type things that come in the clinic. I didn't like that, so I told the guys, I said, "You what? I will take care of anything that's worthy of being in the hospital. If you'll see the clinics and you can be off on time with you, and just right on there, admit Dr. Coleman." So I had huge numbers of cases in the military. It was a great experience. And when I went through my boards, they said, "Where do you get all these cases?" And I said, "Did you do them?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." That was interesting. So they just said, "It's been a pleasure, Dr. Coleman."
Yeah.
The board was a snap. I had to in Chicago, and other people got so upset. I don't know how you get talking about that, but anyway, mother she was a champion with you kids. I mean, many times, there were many days I didn't get home. In those days, you took care of your patient. You're the only one that didn't have their partners.
Yep.
Back when we first moved into Boise, they said, "We really don't want you here. Don't ask us to help you." So the big group in town. And one of the docs came behind about a week later and said, "Hey," he said, "I don't know how you could be so tough on it." He said, "If you need some help, I'll help you." Because usually we did a major case, you had to have an assistant.
Right.
And pretty soon I was the one that, if you called labor and delivery and asked a nurse who to be your Dr. Coleman, I took care of all the nurses. My practice just mushroomed. And it just got out of it. Probably why I was delivering twice what the amounts was. Amazing.
Lots of good work.
Wonderful life.
Yep.
Loved it. I missed that part of it. But probably my kidney thing was a blessing in disguise. That I probably got to do a lot of things I would have otherwise done.
Yeah, missions and travel and
Missions and
family.
Travel. Yeah, it really was wonderful.
Yep. We love you, Dad. You've been
Thank you.
fantastic.
You've been
Love you.
wonderful.
All right, bye.